And gentlemen, this is the 35th episode of Concerned Dabs podcast. I am your host, Katie M. Kane. Hopefully, joining us a bit later will be my co host, Will Terps. But tonight's guest, ladies and gentlemen, we have Jackson McCormack from Natural Wonders. Jackson, are you with us?
Yeah, I'm with you guys. Hi.
What's up, dude? It's good to hear from you, man. I'm glad to have you back on the show, bro.
Yeah, likewise. It's good to be back on the show.
No doubt, dude. I didn't type up any questions because I figured we could wing it for an hour or so. You know what I mean?
Yeah, sounds
Um,
good.
yeah. So, when did you open back up, dude?
We had our official grand reopening, September 14th. So we are getting back into the flow of things over there on Main Street.
Dope, dope. So, for anybody who may not have known, Natural Wonders was located on Cesar Chavez, for what was it, like 2 or 3 years, and then they scored a building in really close distance and had to move, which is a really difficult thing for any business to do, but doubly difficult as a cannabis business, just with all the regulation and zoning and permits and all that stuff, dude. Is there can you talk about that for a second? Because I know it's like it's good to talk about the win, but it's good to talk about like all the hard work that went into it too. You know what I mean?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, working in, the city of Portland is notorious for red tape and bureaucracy, and especially concerning developing new projects or doing construction. It's definitely one of the slowest and most cost prohibitive areas to get work done. But um, taking our time and prioritizing, what's important for the space, it definitely ended up taking us a lot longer than we had originally anticipated. But um, a lot of that has to do with the fact that we're in such an old building. The space that we're in and the space that we were updating was originally built in 1894.
Damn,
And
dude.
so that just carried, its whole own bag of surprises and, delays in getting the project completed. But, there's different levels that you have to work with. You have to work with the Oregon Liquor Control Commission on relocating your license. You have to work with the city of Portland on making sure that your occupancy is correct on your new space. You have to work with them also for an additional license on top of your OLCC. You also have to have a city of Portland license for doing cannabis business. And then you also have to get the construction work done, which, has its whole own separate permitting section. So it's
Yeah,
definitely
you
a
can.
lot of paperwork.
It seems like those construction guys can just put you on pause too, dude. Like you have this deadline to meet, and they're like, "Nope, sorry, we can't make it through. Sign our name on that piece of paper." You know what I mean? And
Yeah,
it's
no,
like,
I mean,
dude, can you make it next week? And then they don't answer your call or anything. It's like, fuck.
yeah, it felt like it took an eternity, but all of the construction people were sure that it was faster than any project they'd seen. So,
Good, way to
I
bug him
guess
on the horn, Jackson. Man, for real. Oh,
it's
it's
all
him
in the
again.
perspective of
Oh, it's him again. Can he take a message? Good job, Jackson. Good job,
exactly.
Jackson. Yeah. So you guys have been open for a couple few months now. Will told us about the special that you had for Native American Heritage Month. Is like if you showed up with your tribal card, 20% off. I was like, damn. I was like, that's tight, man. Like for that month,
Yeah,
and then 10% off when it's not Native American Heritage Month. I'm like, man, that's very, very solid of you, Jackson.
got to keep it rolling. It's definitely nice. We don't have a huge community here in Portland, but we've got a little thing going on, and people are definitely supportive of each other.
Yeah, man, no doubt. So have you hired most of your staff back too? Are you guys rolling like not skeleton crew anymore? You got your schedule filled out and everything?
Yeah, yeah, no, we're getting back to a lot more business as usual. We have two new employees. Uh, one of them comes from the cannabis industry, and one of them comes from like different retail and service background. So it's a nice, interesting mix. But we've got the schedule staffed back out, and um, yeah, just getting things rolling, getting organized, getting farms back on the shelves, getting pre-rolls done. We're preparing to launch a hash pairing menu where you can, purchase the hash and the cannabis so you can, compare how the flavors and the effects transfer when you extract a cannabis plant versus when you just get the bud to smoke.
That's tight, dude.
So, continuing to
My
try to branch out and give unique experiences to people.
Yeah, man. My lady does mad dabs and I do mad flower, and we don't really cross pollinate those two very much, you know what I mean? But it's like it would be dope if there was stuff on the menu that was lined up like that, because it's like, nah, man, I'll get that one and that one. Make
Yeah,
everybody happy
and
at the same
especially,
time, you know what I mean?
yeah, and a lot of these nicer solventless dabs, it's kind of an expensive habit, but it is nice to put some of that higher end hash on top of some of those bowls and whatnot.
Yeah, man. And I'm just like I always ask Will those questions, but I'm happy that the solventless stuff is starting to take off because I mean I wasn't always like a BHO hater, but I just felt in my heart of hearts that it wasn't totally safe to be consuming that, you know, just based on the butane being super explosive and dangerous to work with, and it just feels safer that stuff is being made with ice and water, and it's still getting some top dollar for the producer and everything, the extraction guy. So I think that's awesome. It's difficult to do
Yeah,
in bulk, so it's keeping little guys afloat. You know what I mean?
yeah, definitely. I think they're definitely starting to work out, how that whole process plays into the market and, what's realistic for everybody.
No doubt, man. So I did like a conference call like a couple weeks ago with Jason Ortiz, and there were some other Indians on there, a lady named Ann Begay, and then another dude named Mike Diesel, and he's like a Navajo guy. Everybody was going to that Vegas function this weekend, that MJBiz.con.
Oh,
Wait,
yeah.
is that what it MJBiz.con? But that Mike
Uh,
Diesel dude,
MJ BizCon, yeah.
yeah, that's what it was, yeah. And he was asking me, and I didn't have time. My lady was coming down here, so we're gonna spend time together this weekend. But that function sounded pretty cracking, and that Mike Diesel guy, I followed him. He's my friend on Facebook now, and he shares a bunch of cool news too. But he was sharing an article talking about it was making comparisons between Canada and California. Like the article was saying 80% of California's weed that is consumed is produced by the black market still, just from the cost at the point of sale at a rec point of sale is it's like 450 for an ounce of flour. And so everybody's scoffing at
Wow.
that, and the black market guys are still getting after it. But it also said in Canada that I'm sure you know a few, like there's three big companies that are publicly traded. You can buy stocks in. It's like Kronos is one of them. Um, Grow Canopy or something is one of the
Yeah.
other ones, but it was the article was talking about how those guys are super overproducing there, and the companies like their stock is starting to take a dive or whatever, and
Mhm.
they're saying because there's not enough retail locations in Canada to get it all off, and that like the government is saying, well, maybe you guys are just growing too much. But it was interesting to see that because I felt like that happened in Oregon a couple years ago. Like everybody grew a shit ton of packs, and then the stores couldn't move them all in a year. So, do you think that if there were more retail locations available in Oregon for people to purchase weed, do you think that would help out with the overproduction, or do you think that federal legalization and being able to export is the main thing? Because that's the other thing I wanted to add to you too is I'm pretty sure that Mike Diesel guy is in Jamaica growing nugs down there, and I'm
Huh.
pretty sure they're getting it off to Canada. And so I'm like, fuck, dude, that
Yeah,
is so sick. Like,
they are already doing the medical export, but you know, it's always how people are looking at the numbers, I guess, when it comes down to it, because it seems like as soon as people really got comfortable in the oversupply narrative in Oregon, they did restrict,
the
new
amount of licenses, they stopped
new
giving them out,
production
right?
licenses. Yeah, and at the same time, on the market side, there's a lot of people, even even with the harvest rolling right now, I don't feel like there's necessarily like a flood of product. And seems like a lot of the oversupply was maybe imagined or misinterpreted, or maybe people didn't really understand that cannabis doesn't retain that shelf use forever, I guess.
Yeah. Yeah, like 6
So
months to a year, and then it's
yeah,
not
it
bad
starts
after
to
that, but it's not worth what the lab says it is. You know what I mean? It's not. It's
yeah,
the
exactly.
content
And
isn't the
that's
same.
considering people who are experienced at preserving cannabis.
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, it's been really interesting because when I was just getting back on the market, I had friends in wholesale who were scrambling trying to find flower, trying to find product to sell. Um, which was basically immediately after the production licenses had stopped being issued. Which it's not like there's that quick of an actual market reaction to that. This is something that was already in the
Yeah.
works, basically.
Yeah.
So I'm not really sure where it's going to end up. I mean, getting to a normalized market should be everybody's goal, and everybody's policy decisions for the future should be planning for the fact that eventually we're going to be operating in a national or international market. So I think
Yeah.
everybody should be being prepared for that if they're being smart about it, because it's not like we're even leading the way. As you already mentioned, we've got other countries exporting and importing medical cannabis from each other.
Yeah.
So, yeah, we're really just going to be playing catch up, which doesn't make a ton of sense, but how
Yeah,
much control do we
man.
have?
Yeah. So such is the overregulation of the industry in this country, at least, man. And
Yeah, definitely.
like it's a bummer, but these are the breaks. Another thing I wanted to ask you about too is okay, there's like two things. Will talked about Green Source Gardens not running any CBD strains this year, and he was, salty about it. Will always expresses his opinion, and I love that shit. And but the other part of it was uh wild. I'll just say their name. They're sourcing the CBD for their gummies hemp through hemp isolate now instead of medical cannabis or from rec cannabis that's CBD. And the homegirl Catherine, I'm pretty sure that's why she turned in her 2 weeks. Because they brought that to her in a meeting. She was like, I don't really want to sell this anymore. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? And I was like, damn, that's a bummer. And when Will mentioned the thing about green source, like that was like a month or two after I talked to Catherine about that. And so, do you feel like that too is affecting the market a lot as far as the hemp farming bill and people being able to produce hemp for CBD? Like, is that negatively affecting the medical CBD stuff that's available for patients and rec people in Oregon?
Yeah, well, I think the medical or the CBD flower market, in terms of dispensaries, was always a little bit limited. Most
Yeah,
of the
yeah,
reason
it was,
people are going there wasn't really to get CBD flower. If anything, they do like different variations infused into products, and in that sense, the hemp market definitely makes an impact. But when you look at companies like Wild, in terms of their CBD, they've been using CBD isolate for a long time. They were just sourcing the isolate from cannabis,
yeah,
and their whole explanation is basically that the market couldn't really support what they were trying to do. But from the other side, I mean, in my personal opinion, it's still just isolate. It's not like
yeah,
it's not like they were sourcing a full spectrum CBD option to put this CBD in. They were really just looking to add a specific amount of CBD to different options in their products.
yeah.
And to me,
Just
if it wasn't already a full spectrum CBD option, I don't see a huge difference personally.
yeah. Other than it was sourced from something that was less regulated as far as the production of the hemp versus the cannabis. That's in my
Yeah,
head.
you
That's
know,
where it costs more to grow that CBD on a rec weed farm than it does to
totally,
grow that CBD on a fucking hemp farm. You know what I mean? Like, so
totally,
it's
and it's ridiculous. And
like, yeah,
they
by a
only
lot.
have to test. Yeah, and they only have to get real quality tests done on the stuff that has to go into the market. It's a lot more regulated in terms of what you can spray and what you can do when you participate in the cannabis market, especially when it comes down to, extracts or isolates or things like that. The stuff they sell in, over the counter at whatever store you wander into, even a lot of random clothing stores sell CBD.
Yeah,
None of
they
that
do.
stuff has to has to pass third party testing to have CBD infusions in it. There's just no real oversight for that. So,
Yeah,
I definitely
that's
think it's frustrating for everybody. But at the end of the day, I think there is a home for you know, low THC cannabis, which is really what hemp is.
yeah. And then a lot of the farmers that I've seen online were shitting a cat when the regulations came out for it's like it now it has to be less than 0.03%, and it's like, how the fuck do you do that? Like, you can't. It's pretty tough to guarantee that each seed is going to be that when it's expressed in the nature, you know what I mean? Like, it could test higher or lower. And then in addition to that, like, just how are you going to enforce that? You know what I mean?
Yeah, and
Like,
how important
serious.
is that? Is the real
Yeah,
big
exactly.
question
Yeah, like,
that somehow.
like any, yeah. Let them have it, Jackson. Like, for real.
uh,
I don't see the
Sometimes when
issue with regulation on that too. It's like, why are you guys fucking writing it like that, man? Like, doesn't make sense.
seriously,
And even
yeah,
if
for
it like
some
if it's gonna
reason,
be used for
whenever.
fiber, like if it's gonna be used for fiber too, what the fuck difference does it make? How much THC is there? You know, like, it doesn't matter.
Seriously, it seems like they don't really ever consider reasons for why they have to add these rules to cannabis. We had a child-proof barrier to pretty much anything that has to do with weed when that really isn't how anything else in the real world works. The rest of the world operates with a little bit of adult responsibility.
Yeah, man. That's man, such accurate terminology too, dude. Like fuck. It is, man. Like if you have kids, don't leave the drugs or alcohol around them or within reach or like and if it is then make sure they're educated on what it does to them and how to,
Yeah.
like there's
Yeah.
all
When
these
you get in trouble for even when you get in trouble for illegal drugs, there's no extra fine for having it in a non-child resistant container.
yeah,
Like, let's move past
yeah,
this.
no doubt, man. No doubt. Um so yeah, like that's the CBD thing too. We had this guy Paul Smith or Paul Swift from Swift Solutions. He's a lab testing guy, and he was talking about a lot of they do a lot of testing for hemp farms now too. And one of the things that he was saying is should be more relevant is like the heavy metals testing. He said that
Definitely.
because one farm like they had this field right, and they ran hemp, and then they harvested, did the math and everything, and then the next year they ran hemp on the same field, same space, didn't change anything, and it only pulled like half the weight. Like the harvest was the yield was half of what it was the year before. And so I was like, holy shit, I didn't even think about that. You know what I mean? And I was asking him, is it because I've read a lot of articles that say hemp, remediates the soil and cleans it and takes the toxins out of it and shit. So it's like if it's taking the bad stuff, it's got to take good stuff out too. And if it's taking all the nutrients out of the soil to where you're getting half of the yield the next year, then um shit, that's kind of difficult, dude. And then that also would be indicative of if there's bad shit in the soil, then it's gonna be in the hemp too after you grow it on the soil, you know what I mean? So is
Yeah,
there
definitely.
do you know of any I keep asking the hemp farmer guys to come on the show and I can't get them to commit yet. So I'm not aware of any sort of lab testing they have to undergo in order to process or sell their product right now. Are you? Like,
Definitely not in any regards like that. But when people are looking at testing heavy metals, that would also something that they usually be testing the soils for rather than even trying to double check it in the finished product. Because if it's in the soils, then it's definitely going to be coming up in cannabis just by the nature of the way that it runs through. But,
yeah,
another thing you mentioned about, if they just ran a crop of cannabis, depending on how they treated the area before and after and how they harvested, you know, running running any sort of crop, in a field is gonna pull a specific set of nutrients back out.
yeah,
And if you want it to perform the same way the next season, it has to be dynamic enough to revitalize itself. So that's where, like, biodiversity and really heavy biological life, like microbiological life in the soil, is really important. And just like overall stewardship, where permaculture or hugelculture practices, something like Green Source Gardens uses,
yeah,
is the only way you're really going to see the 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 outputs increase over time versus watching it decrease. That's honestly one of my um, major issues with agriculture overall is just the way that we cultivate things. There's no way for us to not be stripping stuff out of the soil. There's no way for us to not need to add amendments and do different things every year to make sure that the ground can perform. But when you do introduce a lot of different life into the same area, you can figure out how to strike a balance through the whole process and enjoy harvesting different things from the same area. And
No
it's
doubt.
definitely a little bit lower yield, um, but it, you know, it's more sustainable. And in the end, we do have to figure out something that's going to work for the long term and not just a one off.
Yeah, no doubt, man. Like when he told me that too, it made me think really long and hard about making my own soil too, because all of those amendments that I buy to put in my soil, like they say that there's heavy metals in there, and it doesn't say like high quantities, but it's like they're in there. So it's cool that the
Yeah,
label is transparent, but I never really worried about that or thought about how that was gonna affect me through the product that I'm
yeah,
growing in the soil. But now I'm like, holy shit, dude, I didn't even think about that. Like I never even thought to pay for that on a lab test. So I was
seriously.
like,
I
fuck.
mean, we're also exposed to so many different things all the time. To a certain degree, a lot of us are lucky just because our bodies can deal with a lot and process out a lot of garbage. But, for people with autoimmune issues or different other compromised health systems, we definitely have people who come into our shop who actually talk about issues like heavy metals, and talk about wanting to restrict what sort of brands and farms they're purchasing from just because they're concerned and, their body can't necessarily handle a big shock like that. So,
Yeah,
that is something nice and consistent. If you have a favorable experience with something that's grown in a permaculture style setting on the same setting every year, if you haven't had a poor reaction to it or if you've had a good reaction to it so far, chances are it's going to continue to trend in that direction because, nothing new is being introduced.
yeah. And then that was, dude, I tell that story to people sometimes. It was after I came back from Seattle and you scored me that job at Pure Oregon, man. It's like you were working there and they were hiring. It was like,
Oh,
thank you
yeah.
for that, dude. Like that was awesome. But I remember like working there and I was just like front desk and packaging, right? So I'm just weighing up grams or taking IDs. And it was like you guys would be doing dabs on breaks in the office and you'd always be like, man, you want to do that? I'm like, nah, I'm cool. And he'd be like, "Man, why?" And I would tell you, like, "Man, my fucking heart hurts, bro." Like, I don't
Oh,
know. I
yeah.
think it's the dabs, and it was from Seattle, and that was before we learned the whole concentration thing of pesticides in the product. It's like whatever you spray on the flowers will be concentrated by 3 in the oil. So it was before all of that, but it's like, dude, it just felt like all of those dabs I was taking in Seattle were dirty. You know what I mean? And that was
Yeah.
before I knew what the term actually meant and before the lab tests were determining, yeah, that's actually you're right. You know what I mean? So I just
Oh,
always remember that part of it, dude, and being paranoid and I
well,
don't
I'm
know.
glad you didn't take those because even though, even when all those things first started, when we're talking about, hey, everything's concentrated, I was definitely feeling like, hey, you guys, just so you know, like everything's concentrated, like it's in the name.
Yeah.
Um, but besides that, we didn't even know how to take dabs back then, man. We had horrible form, horrible technique.
Yeah.
Even if the
Yeah,
dabs are
dude.
clean, the
Hot
approach is really
dabs.
poor because hot dabs are not good for you. They've
No,
talked
they're
about
not.
some of those terpenes becoming carcinogenic at really high temperatures. So
Yeah.
you got to respect the technique. That's for sure.
No doubt, man. No doubt. I learned a lot from kids like you, Jackson. Like the whole
Yeah, for
e-nail
people
thing and
listening,
everything.
that means you do not want to take your dab off of a really hot nail or element or whatever you're taking off. A lot of terms we have for that: waste it to taste it. You could try out a cold start dab. All of these things. should be handily available on a local YouTube channel.
Yeah, man. Scroll through IG too. Those kids are getting super artsy with that shit nowadays, man.
Yeah.
They got like
Don't
the
waste your
glass.
lungs. We did all the training and beta runs for you guys, so
Yeah, man,
um,
for real.
and learn from our mistakes.
Yeah, man, no doubt. Is there anybody?
Oh,
Well, go ahead.
I had a I had a question. You had mentioned some of the people, some of the natives that were going to go out to Vegas for the BizCon recently.
Yeah, yeah.
Um, there were also there was also a meeting there December 11th where the federal government was taking input from tribal representatives. I was wondering, do you know if anybody was able to go to that or?
I'm pretty sure that's why that Mike Diesel guy was going. He's Navajo, I think. So I'm pretty sure he was there for that. He emailed me and the tickets were like $200 to go to the conference day, and it was like a week before it. I'm like, man, nah. Like my lady's coming down. I'm not gonna be able to make it. But
I
that
know.
Mike
I
Diesel,
was
and then there was another Navajo lady named Ann Begay who is also an attorney who is trying to get into the game, and it sounds like they got land and stuff ready to go out there. So I really want to bug them to get on the show and then see if they need any cultivation tips too or goons. So it
right.
just sounds like
I
a
just keep
winner. But
trying to
that,
convince everybody to keep it really simple. But I am happy
yeah,
that at least there was an opportunity for tribes to go out there and make a fuss. And the people that I did get to talk to are at least, kind of on board with the similar push regarding the THC testing. I think there's going to be unified voice behind, a 1% threshold, which is a lot more reasonable for people to figure out.
yeah, and it allows for some variation too. Like
Yeah,
it's
exactly. And it's already been adopted in some other places. And the whole thing is, for me, can you guys point to the problems that are going to occur, if this doesn't get put in place? Because right now we've got cannabis getting legalized everywhere, and if we've already got
yeah.
THC available on the market, I don't think with the oversight that already exists that having a little bit more variance is going to make a huge difference for anybody.
Yeah, I feel like it would eliminate a lot of shit too, man. Because like I look on Amazon sometimes just for like tents or lights or like the shit that you can hang lights from, the little arch things, because there's good deals on there. They just clone shit from China and sell it to you for half the price. But you
Right?
can,
Was
yeah,
that
but
Amazon Basics?
yeah, dude, yeah. But it's like you can also buy hemp seeds and hemp. Like you can buy like a half ounce of it and it comes in a jar. And like the reviews, there's a shit ton of them, like hundreds of reviews. And then people are just like, yeah, it looks all right. It's not the same packaging as the photo, but it's nugs, and it's not. It doesn't really get me high, but it looks like nugs, and it's hemp. Like it's weird, dude. Because I'm like, holy fuck. How are people doing
Right?
this right now? You know what I mean? I was like, damn, like where is that farm located, and how did they? You know what I mean? Like it would just
All right. Sounds like we
it was
better get our online store rolling,
well,
bro.
dude, it was insane to me because it's like if it's like, because cannabis is way fucking regulated. You could never do that shit on Amazon with regular weed. You know what
Oh
I mean? But
no,
it's like with the hemp,
no way.
and and there was a guy. I was giving him a lift, and he was a weed guy, but he was telling me that, dude, there's literally no testing at all. So it's like you could say it's hemp.
No.
You know what I mean? And fucking sell it on Amazon or wherever you. And there's not. It's for you to get in trouble for it, they'd have to basically confiscate it from you and then run it through their lab to fucking prove that there's THC in it. Because otherwise, there's no barrier to fucking
and
market
nobody can
like that shit.
even and nobody can even tell, like, you can be like, oh, 1,500 milligrams CBD. You could just be selling lotion. It's not
Yeah,
like.
Yeah,
I
there's
don't
no way to
know.
confirm that. There's no batch number on that fucking lab test for you to check on a website and be like, "Oh, okay, yeah,
No, a lot
yeah,
of
they
these
did."
companies selling stuff don't even have their own websites. You just like buy a third party on some random website like Amazon. Then you go to find, you're like, hey, this wasn't working. You go back to the manufacturer.
Yeah,
You're like, oh, they don't even exist. They were a one batch, one off.
yeah, dude, it's
It's
weird, and
the
it's like
Wild
the number of
West.
yeah, it totally is, dude. That's the whole CBD thing. I like there's CBD dispensaries now in Phoenix with the big the flag signs in the yard with all the colors and shit waving, and it's like they're on blast, bro. And I'm like, damn, I kind of want to go check one out just to ask them some questions and see if I could get them on the show, but I already know what the answers are, you know. It's like, you guys are just winging
Yeah,
it, like, like got a bunch of money for marketing and like
yeah.
they're selling it.
They're even
Nobody is
popping up in
asking.
Portland.
Yeah, dude, like
Yeah,
nobody's asking for what they get in a cannabis shop. Like, was this tested? Was this? It's like, nah, it's CBD. It's safe. Here's the gummies. You know what I mean? Here's the drinks. Here's the cookies. Here's the it's
right.
fucking
Yeah,
weird.
and no
It's weird.
regulations on any of that stuff either.
Nah,
You
and
know,
that's the
what
thing
can it
too.
look like? What can the packaging be like? What
And
can it be
yeah,
named?
and like you're saying, the 1,500 milligrams or whatever. It's like, how do you guys? How is that calculated? How
Can you
does
show me your
each one of
control study?
yeah, like how does each of these gummies have 10 milligrams of CBD in it? Like, where did it come from? Like, was it oil? Was it, and the guy selling it to you can never answer that question, and that's my issue with it. Like that's my issue with the regular weed shops down here too. Is no lab testing and no
Yeah,
no product knowledge from the guy behind the counter. So it's like that bothers me. When you go and fucking buy a car, that guy will tell you everything about the car, dude. You know what I mean? Like he's on his
seriously.
shit. Any question you got, he can answer it, and if not, he can look it up. Not with CBD, I guess, man, and I guess a little bit with
Yeah,
cannabis, but you know,
yeah. I can only imagine down there in Arizona.
yeah, dude. The law passed August 27th. The law took effect that requires lab testing, but they're not going to start enforcing it until August 22nd or August 27th next year. So I'm just like, what the
Wow,
fuck?
that is a long rollout.
Dude, I'm like that's
Nothing
pretty
like
generous to the producers to get compliant, like that's nice to them, but to everybody who thought they were gonna get clean shit after the 20, it's like, nope, gotta wait another year.
I could totally understand that in a recreational market, but for a medical market, that's pretty inappropriate in my opinion.
Yeah, man. That's safe.
I'm like, honestly, on the rec side, it's hard to, when everybody has to pay a sin tax and they lump weed in with all the other things, it's hard to feel like, hey, it needs to be so, everything has to be so clean, blah, 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 like to a certain degree. I'm like, this is for recreational customers and they get warned for their health every time they purchase something.
Yeah.
Why is it more regulated than everything else? If you want it to be for
Yeah.
medical people, I think it's really fair to have good, clean standards and,
Yeah.
medical grade quality. And I like sustainable standards either way, but it doesn't really make sense from a regulatory or logical standpoint. I mean, it's like you guys got to pick a side on the regulations.
Yeah.
Is this
No
bad
doubt.
for us? Is this a scary product that we need to really tightly regulate? Or is this a superfood that's supposed to cure everything and the government's going to try to like squeeze all the patents out of it?
Yeah. No doubt, man. I don't understand, man. It bugs me sometimes. When I read that article too, where it said 80% of the weed in Cali, I was like, damn, 80% black market, like fuck. Cause I
That's
went there
a
for
lot.
dude, I went there for that premiere, for a weekend, and it was like
Oh yeah.
I stopped at 2 shops on the way home because I brought some nugs with me, from the homie and shit, and dude, it was all bad on the shelf, like, for 50 bucks, some really dark brown fucking look like from last year, just, like, outdoor shit for 50 bucks an eighth, and then, like, they wouldn't let me smell the jar, nothing. I'm just like, "Dude, how much of that is tax?" And it's like 15 of those dollars were for tax. You know what I
Yeah,
mean?
a
And
lot, and they just keep trying to increase it. It doesn't really make sense.
yeah, I don't understand, man. Like
It's the
who would
goal,
wanna who'd wanna take part in
well,
that,
they got to
man? I
pick
don't
some
understand.
goals. Regulators have to decide, hey, is the goal to take this off the black market and crush all of the black market sales and deliver, good products to customers while we legalize this? Because if that's the goal, they need to be making it as accessible and unburdensome as possible. We need product to be able to have ease to get to the shelf and get to market. Wild, for example, we were just talking about them. They sell infused sparkling water, and
Damn.
they were excited to launch it to the OLC, to the dispensaries finally.
Yeah.
And I was like, hey, where's those waters?
Yeah.
And they said, oh, well, actually, OLCC hit us with a packaging delay. Our labels and stuff haven't been approved for dispensary sales yet. Meanwhile, you see these waters sold in any random gas station or wherever else available.
Yeah,
um,
dude. CBD infused
but
water.
yeah, yeah. Um, I, I do appreciate that there's a little bit of a standard when it comes to dispensaries, but there also just needs to be some priorities in terms of, helping people be successful in the market. The goal is to make this the market for cannabis. The OLCC and other regulators' goals should be to defeat any other markets that exist. And having high taxes and high burdens to entry are exactly the opposite approach of how you create a thriving market.
Yeah, man. I agree. Like that word too, that burden to entry or barrier to entry, that was a term that the Monsanto guy used. What were they called? The genetic people, Phylos Bioscience.
Oh,
That was a quote
Philos.
from him. Yeah, that was a quote from him. Was we have serious barriers to entry for anybody else trying to get into the game, and it's like, man, it bugs me that guys have confidence saying things like that, and I feel like there does need to be less regulation and more equality. That's why I like supporting you too, man, because you're like one of the only skins I know in the game that's like in the game, like not, like doing it, and like I actually know you, and it's cool to see you still making it through, dude, after all the bad shit that happens, you know what I mean? Like nobody sees
Totally.
that.
Yeah.
Everybody sees the cool posts online of the new shit on the shelf, you know what I mean? And it's that's what you want to sell, but it's I feel like I get to see a lot more of it, and it's inspiring, dude, because shit does go wrong no matter what you're trying to do, and a lot of shit
Small
can go
business
wrong in this
is not
game, you
for
know?
everybody. Yeah,
Yeah, so
definitely.
I'm just like I gotta give you your props, dude, because just business in general is tough to compete in, but cannabis even 100 times more, man. Especially in Oregon, where it's such a small state, and it's like
Right?
there's
Where's the
only there's
people?
yeah, dude, serious. And I just feel like, man, the federal legalization thing, it really can make a difference. Like all those rec guys, if they could export, like they'll be good.
Oh,
You know what I mean?
yeah.
Especially the
Oregon will be
outdoor guys.
taken.
Yeah, the outdoor
Yeah.
guys especially. It's like, nah, man, it'd be like grapes for wine, dude. Like, there's gonna
Will be
be
like the
some,
old days for those guys.
yeah, man, it'd be like some regional shit happening. Like they want it from this. like that Lions Tree guy, how he has that fucking terrace or whatever. I always look at his IG feed. I'm like, dude, like that's like
They're exceptional.
yeah, dude, like really, really nice outdoor organic stuff that's based on the climate and where it's at. And I
Yeah,
don't know, man.
totally. I love how they push the limits, on finishing times and really let the genetics express themselves. There are definitely
Yeah,
some awesome, fearless cultivators down there.
yeah, man. Because I went to this place called Merkin Vineyards with my lady yesterday for dinner, and I like she's a wine person, and like just hearing her and the waiter guy talk about the wine, it was like, damn, this is like how we talk about weed and shit, you know? Like it's like there's a whole depth to understanding the flavor and the region it came from and all this stuff, and I'm like, damn, like like that's gonna happen with cannabis too. It's just slow and happening right now because everybody can't have it where they live, you know?
Totally. I definitely think you'll see a lot more crossover um, in terms of the way cannabis is delivered and presented to people compared to, how wine is approached. Just like we've adopted a lot of things from some other industries, I think, with any emerging industry, we're kind of looking for, what do other people do for this?
Yeah,
And I the wine industry definitely offers a lot of similarities when it comes to, understanding how the products are cultivated and how that plays into the bigger picture,
yeah,
along with,
and
understanding complex flavors.
yeah, and the meaning of the words artisan and craft. You know what I mean? Uh,
Oh, yeah.
like those wine, and that's one thing I learned from you too, dude. Is and from you, I would say it's branding, right? But like just the way shit looks, man, and the way the package is and everything. That's one thing I remember about Pure Oregon too, is you did the packaging for those tinctures or whatever, and it was just
Yeah.
like, man, I was like, that's tight. You know what I mean? And it's like, no, this is important. It's like we're calling it this because it's from that era of medicine. You know what I mean? It's refined into this and it, like, dude, I don't know. To me, that shit was tight because I see a lot of other stuff that's just really loud with the font or the coloring and really kind of attention grabbing, and uh the shit that you've done is kind of more artistic and elegant, you know what I mean? Like fucking Steve Jobs type shit, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like
Yeah,
it's
and when
gotta
we were doing
match.
that back then, it was medicinal, it needed to deliver the message.
Yeah. Yeah. And it was like a apothecary or something. That was like the name of it. Like
Oh
apothecary
yeah,
tincture or something like that.
original apothecary.
Yeah. And I don't know, like that was one thing that surprised me even back then too, because that was 2014, and I was at the front desk the first week or so, and the guy who was making the tinctures was there on site, but he didn't have it done yet. And on my first day, like Bud, he like came down, he's like, okay. And he like told me, he's like, okay, if anybody comes in asking for the Harlequin tincture, tell them we're gonna have it tomorrow, okay? And I was like, okay. He's like, if they come asking that, so you tell them it's in a beer tomorrow, okay? I was like, okay, man, I got it, man, cool. And like in my head, I'm like, man, he must be bullshit. Nobody's gonna come in here asking for no fucking CBD Harlequin tincture. And I shit you not, Jackson. Like 10 people that day walked through the door and asked for that. Like they didn't give me their idea. Like, man, you got the CBD Harlequin tincture. I'm like, tomorrow. And they just left. You know what I mean? Like that was all they wanted. And so that kind of showed me the value of it back then. You know what I mean? And it kind of makes sense
Yeah,
to why it's so popular now, I guess, you know. And it was
yeah,
always like
yeah. I mean,
older
it was
folks.
rare back then. You
Yeah.
couldn't you couldn't find a reliable, repeatable source for a tincture that worked for you, especially not a CBD dominant tincture.
Yeah.
It was just getting off the ground. People were still figuring out how to make tinctures really well with cannabis. what are the best delivery methods? Who has CBD? At that point, it was pretty uncommon still.
Yeah, man. I didn't know. I'd heard of Harlequin, but I didn't know any farms running that shit. You know what I mean? I was like, I
Yeah.
have no use for that. I want to smoke to chill out, like, you know.
Yeah, no, it was wild. I remember, that was when I had worked with a medical farm down in Southern Oregon, and we used to get stuff lab tested way before it was required. And we had a
Yeah,
random batch of a strain called Big Bud, and it just came back with significant amounts of CBD, like enough to be a CBD strain.
that's
And
tight.
it was so weird. I got it tested again, but sure enough, still came back with CBD. So Bud and them were interested in, making a tincture batch out of the stuff. Um,
Yeah,
but it's really interesting to think that we had some of these CBD varieties mixed about our cannabis without ever knowing because we didn't have the luxury of consistent, reliable testing.
yeah, dude. And that's one thing I want too, dude, is for I say this every single episode, and everybody's like, man, shut up, Kane. We know what you want. But it's like I want everybody to be able to grow their own. But in addition to that, it's like availability for lab testing. You know what I mean? Like
Yeah,
whatever you run in your basement or your backyard, like you should be able to and for $100 or less. You know what I mean? It's like, yo, can I see what's in this? You know,
yeah,
like and because especially if you're cracking seeds, you might luck out and have that one that does have some CBD in it, like randomly. I was explaining
totally.
this the other day too. I'm pretty sure I was telling my lady about it at the wine place, but how we'd get packs from a farm, and it's like they crack seeds of Blue Dream, and they're like these 5 packs are all labeled Blue Dream, but they all smell different. You know what I mean? And it's like the untrained consumer would be like, man, I like this one. Like those ones don't smell the same. Like why do those ones smell different? It's like because they crack seeds and variation in genetics, and it's like they don't get it. You know what I
Totally.
mean? It's like, and it's you know, and it's like, man, there's, and I would always pull the if you and your lady had 10 kids, four of them would look like you, four of them would look like her, and two of them would be like a mix. You know, so that's these are the mixes. They're not the ones that's like
Yeah,
this or like that. So there's variation.
yeah.
That's
There's
one
so much
thing
to see. Oh, go
I
ahead.
want. Yeah, dude, I want that to survive. I want people to understand that and be able to do their own thing still and see what's in it without just having to pay for it on the shelf and accept that as the word.
Yeah, I wish people had to grow a plant one time at least. I
Yeah,
think it gives you a really good value and appreciation and
I
understanding.
agree. Yeah, I agree, man. Even if you fuck up, it's like you can see
Yeah,
the
you're like, oh, okay, maybe that either that was as easy as I thought it was, or that wasn't as easy as I thought it was.
yeah.
Either way, it's a valuable lesson, and I think you can learn so many different things. Just like you're talking about genetic expression. I think it's so cool to see that. How things come through, how genetics get expressed. Generation after generation. So
Yeah.
yeah, I mean, I agree. I think we got to get everybody needs access to some cool genetics to grow in their backyard, grow in their porch.
Yeah, man. That's one thing I want to get into when I get back to the Northwest too. Is I want to do one project like I want it to smell and taste like this or look like this, and I'm pretty close already. Like I just gotta make sure everything's pretty consistent. But I just feel like those guys have a lot of fun and the creativity in it, not just in the actual process of creating it, but being able to name some shit and make a logo and cardstock. It's almost like an album cover, you know what I mean? So it's like
Yeah,
there's lots of fun ways to express yourself as an artist. I just I want to
Yeah,
get
I
into
was
that
just
shit, dude.
thinking about you the other day because Deep Creek Gardens was said they've been running their cut of moose and lobster,
Oh,
which
what?
I've never really seen that, but next time it comes around, I'm definitely gonna reserve myself some because I was like, oh yeah, I was like,
Yeah.
I remember that was a favorite. Anytime I see
Yeah.
those news popping around, I always think about you doing your thing, testing out all those different genetics out there in the field.
Yeah, dude, that man, that was one of my favorites from Dynasty too. It was a good sativa. And then the one thing that I'll tell you about that too is when we would trim it, it seemed like it'd fucking bother the shit out of our eyes, right? Like the smell or just it was like it was weird, like we'd sneeze, like we're like allergic to it or something, like all three of us. And then
Mhm.
one of my patients had glaucoma and like he fucking ran through his and wanted. I was like, dude, that was it. I didn't get the best of that shit. The fucking landlord got. Are you jacking? He was like, dude,
Yeah.
he said that that really helped with his eye pressure on his glaucoma. He said, man, that really helped with my eyes. And I'm like, are you for real? And he's like, yeah. Why do you laugh? I was like, fuck, it bothered us when we were trimming it. You know what I mean? It was weird. So
It's
it
like the
just
opposite effect.
Yeah, dude. And so maybe that was after smoking it or something too. I don't know, but it was helpful for that guy for that sort of condition. And it was cool, man, because usually patients don't ever tell me shit like that. You know what I mean? You just give them the weed and you don't hear from them until next year when it's getting close to, hey, man, you still need a card? It's like, yeah, I need a card, man. I saw a helicopter fly over. Send it to me. Like fuck.
Oh man,
But
for
it's
real. But
but that I'm a fan of that strain, Jackson, for sure, for sure.
yeah, I'm excited to see the breeders cut.
Yeah, no doubt, man. And that also too, man. Fuck, I want to get that guy on the show because there's a lot of different shit that he's done that I'm a fan of. But that moose and lobster too, like the way I want like, dude, why did you name it that? It's like you say, it's like shout out to Maine because they have lobster, and like I'm like, but dude, like the way that group, I'm serious. It looked like fucking moose horns, bro.
Oh
Like
yeah, I
branched out with
remember
you know what I mean? Like the way it branched out and scooped up was just like some moose antlers. So, and but like moose antlers, but also like lobster pinchers. You know what I mean? Like coming together. And so
that.
I wanted to be like,
uh,
dude, is that why he called it that? Because he had I remember it was at your store. It was like buy two of these 10 packs of seeds and get a free tester. And I was like, dude, I grabbed like 4 or 6 of them or something. So I had a bunch of those tester ones and it was honey badger haze. And
oh yeah, I
that
remember
shit
those.
too,
I think I
like
still have a
all of
pack of
the
those.
like yeah, dude, like there was a bunch of different phenos expressed in those testers, but it seemed like all of them on the fan leaf, bro, they had like a yellow stripe going down the middle of the fan leaf. Like all of them. I
That's
was like, "What
cool.
the fuck?" I was like, "Is that why you called it honey badger?" Like, man, like that's fucking cool. I don't
He
know.
is a he is a really really talented breeder, that's for sure.
Yeah, man. Fan of that guy's work. If you're listening, Professor P, please come on the show sometime. We'd love to ask you about the stuff that you do. The
Yeah.
relic shit too. I'm like, damn, I gotta get some of
Oh,
those.
I'm so excited about all those projects. He always has something cooking. I keep missing him when he comes by the store too. I'm like, wait, I just missed this guy. I can tell
Damn.
just he's got a specific effect on the sales distribution on my products. So
Word,
can
word.
always tell when he's snuck by the shop.
Dope, dope. Yeah, he always grabbed the dabs, man.
Yeah,
Oh, I gotta get some of
those and
this. I
those
gotta get some of
medical
this.
strength sour bots. He likes those
Word. Hell yeah. Yeah, shout out to Professor P, man. We gotta get him
for
on there.
sure.
Yeah. Well shit, dude, that's an hour right there. Jackson, is there anything else that you want to talk about or ask us about anything?
No, I was just excited to get back and connect with you guys. Bummed we missed Terps, but I do get to see him on pretty regular occasion these days, so
Yeah,
not miss
yeah,
not missing him as much as I was last time.
yeah. And then I didn't really mention it on the show, but it's like maybe our tribe will have something going on next year that you can talk about, or someone from our tribe can talk about. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
Like
I
that's
mean, I can briefly mention, I've been trying to have productive talks with our tribe and with some other tribes about participating in cannabis or hemp or whatever it takes. Really trying to get people to consider scaling back their projects or at least creating, backup plans to their projects that are a lot smaller in scale because that seems to be a major hiccup for people.
yeah, scaling up, dude. Like hiring enough staff, and yeah, that shit's hard, bro. I
Yeah,
try
it
and
can
do
get
that
tough.
through
I've been
tarot.
trying to convince people, yeah, let's start little, something basically one person could do because as soon as we start to get the wheels rolling, people start to, start talking about all of these different experts and other people they need to hire or bring on to the project. And,
Yeah,
I'm like,
man.
hey
And
guys, can we just put the seed in the ground and add water and we can just like see
yeah,
how it goes and talk about it because that's really cheap
yeah.
and easy
Put
and
down
it'll
one,
give us all the feel.
yeah. Put down one $10 chip and roll the fucking dice. Like just do it.
Exactly,
See what happens. Like that. Like that. Yeah, you got to do that one time at least.
right? And not before
Yeah.
and not after the fact either.
Yeah, dude. Yeah. The table is hot.
Now
You should
now is
put
the
put
time. Yeah.
yeah, put down a chip and roll them, man. Fuck. And that's
2020 is insane. We're pushing this shit through the tribe.
yeah, yeah, man. I talking to my Jason Ortiz too, man. He's my buddy now. He's like, man, he goes, when you come to this one, he goes, have he's like, there'll be investors. He's got a lot of organizations that are trying to get equality in the cannabis industry by getting investors or funding to persons of color who are trying to get a license. So
Nice,
he
nice.
told us about one of his buddies that got 150 racks in Vermont, I think. And I was like, holy shit, dude, that probably. I was like, my budget was 160, man. And he's like, for real? I'm like, dude, yeah. And so like he messaged me like, dude, get your. I was like, I have all those old spreadsheets. I'll make it look pretty again, man. But that's
Yeah.
uh that's one thing too
Yep.
is I try to express to people is just like, look, you don't need 1.2. You know what I mean? Like, you could do this way smaller than I'm trying to do it. This is just tier two in my state. That's how big I could go.
Yeah,
So
yeah, no,
just
exactly. And that's the thing, if you have the opportunity and the means, by all means you can jump all the way in. But for people staying on the edges because they're worried about the initial investment, I definitely
yeah,
recommend starting small. There's a lot less risk and um
yeah,
seems like there's pretty much equal upside, honestly.
yeah, dude. Serious, like less than $1,000. You could do something nice, especially if you're in a climate where you can grow outdoors through the summer. Like
Yeah,
even just
exactly. The people up here are blessed, so
yeah,
they should definitely act like it.
no doubt. Yeah. Well, shit, dude. Is there anything else that you want to add before we go, Jackson?
No, I don't think so. I'm looking forward to another awesome year, and hopefully, now that we're planting our roots here for the long term, we'll be able to focus on some other great missions, like getting Indian country involved in cannabis, or getting some of this plastic waste out of the market, or bringing social
Yeah.
consumption to the people. Something.
Yeah. Yeah, no doubt. All good points, sir. Like those are all excellent goals to focus on in 2020, and I'm glad you accomplished your goal for 2019, bro. Like I'm super proud of you, man. I try to anybody who's going to Portland, man, Natural Wonders. Selling Hawthorne by Fred Myers,
I
man.
appreciate it, man.
Yeah, man.
Exactly, exactly.
It's good for you, dude. Not just because you're my friend and you're Indian, but because, dude, it's you powered through when shit got rough, and that's awesome, dude. That's inspiring. People don't do that, but you did, so good for you, man.
Thank you, thank you. I really appreciate it.
No doubt, no doubt. And then we'll probably bug you again in 6 months or so, and try and get you back on the show and see how it's going, man. We're on 35 episodes now, so we've been rolling, bro. We've been
Congratulations.
rolling. Yeah, man. We're
Yeah,
trying to keep
that's
it pushing.
awesome, man. Way to get after it. I'm really proud of you guys. That's great.
Yeah, and it's really fun talking to guests like you because I have personal connection and I know that you're super knowledgeable and experienced in the industry, and you're able to articulate it for people who don't have that level of understanding or experience.
Well, I appreciate the chance to use the platform, so thank you for having me on here.
No doubt. We appreciate it. We appreciate you, man. So I hope you have a good rest of your night. And shout out to Will Terps. Hopefully he makes it back next week. We got Jeff Mizanski, uh, fella who went to prison for 30 years for an eighth of weed back in like the 90s. So we're excited to interview him about his experience and see what his take is on legalization. But I'm going to go ahead and do my outro dance. Ladies and gentlemen, this was the 35th episode of Concerned Dabs podcast. I was your host, Katie M. Kane, missing in action. Tonight was my co host, Will Terps. Tonight's guest was Jackson McCormack from Natural Wonder. Ladies and gentlemen, indigenous owned, Portland, organically sourced. Holler at the man. He's down there on Hawthorne, right next to Fred Meyer. Um, I got to give a shout out to my guys in production, Mitchell Wilson and Jesse Curry. This has been a Main Node and Joseph Street Enterprise production.